Okay, we're continuing with the book here, Holy Grail, A Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers. We're on the letter I. Just briefly for interviews, most important thing for an interview is that they like you. They already know you've got adequate credentials by having chosen to interview you. So it's really a chance to kind of become friends, see if you like each other, you like the feel of the place. You should always read about the place a lot before you go there so you can talk about it intelligently. Irenaeus, we're not going to get into that too much. One good quote, error dresses elegantly so that the unwary may be led to believe that it is more truthful than the truth itself. Yeah, the people that make up the left, for example, they're smart. They hire the best psychologists to figure out the truth about things. The politically incorrect stuff that you're not allowed to say, that's what they know. That's what they go by, even though they spout all this lefty BS to gaslight everybody. But Irenaeus also, I remember it as meaning somebody who's conciliatory, that style. Okay, the next one is John Irving. He wrote the book, The World According to Garp. And what I liked about him when I was a young guy, I was a wrestler, and he was a wrestler himself. He wrestled in high school and stuff. I actually met him at a wrestling camp. So we liked the idea of a wrestler becoming a famous novelist. The World According to Garp was made into a movie, and it was sort of a big thing when I was young. He worked with Kurt Vonnegut, who was a very good writer also. I always liked Kurt Vonnegut. I would read these novels when I was young, I was growing up, because I would try to discuss them with my father. I didn't really understand them when I was young, but just the fact I was reading a lot was good for me. Okay, a couple quotes here. He said, if you don't feel that you are possibly on the edge of humiliating yourself, of losing control of the whole thing, then you probably aren't doing what is very vital. Yeah, so that's along the lines of you have to push it if you're going to do anything great. And if you're pushing it, you're going to be a little scared you're going to have a major screw up. And it was a little bit like, Dr. McDougall had quoted Henry Heimlich. He said, if people are able to easily understand you, then you're not being creative enough. You should be on the edge of what can be done, of what you can do. You want to get yourself to that level. He says, people only ask questions when they're ready to hear answers. Yeah, if you're on a date with a girl and she starts asking you questions about yourself, that's a good sign. Then she thinks you're worth asking questions about. Let's see, I'm not attracted to a writer by style. What style do Dickens, Grass, and Vonnegut have in common? How silly. I'm attracted to what makes them angry, passionate, outrages them, what they applaud, find sympathetic in other human beings, and what they detest in other humans as well. They are writers with great emotional range. And what I would say by that is, the best writers are the Christian writers. They can create such intense emotional moments. There's nothing like Les Miserables, when the bishop forgives Jean Valjean and Jean Valjean dedicates himself to becoming a great man. There's nothing like, Brothers Karamazov with Alyosha, all the terrible things that happen in Brothers Karamazov, but Alyosha, by being nice, by thinking of other people, he just makes everything better. He's like the male version of my mother. Like Christmas Carol, what a magnificent turnaround it was for Scrooge to go from being a miserly grouch to being a Christian. Okay, and you just say to yourself, that's the way to live. Why not be happy all the time? Have the attitude of Scrooge after he appreciated Christmas. Have the attitude of the bishop, give people a chance. Most of the time they deserve it. Sometimes they don't. Most of the time they do. Let's see. He says, we are formed by what we desire. Yeah, so you want to desire something good, something great, the best you could do, because that's how you're going to focus your energy. So people sometimes give me crap for wanting to try to be the best doctor in the world. I go, well, even if I fail, I'll be really good. So that's it. Yeah, wanting to try to save civilization. Even if I fail, I'll do a good job at doing good things. So I'll go for that. So if you have a high goal, even if it's more than you can handle, I can handle my goals, but even if it's more than you can handle, you raise yourself up to that. And other persons have said, the bigger the goal, the bigger the effort. Okay, and you got to think big if you're going to do something big, something great. Okay, John Irving continues, more than half, maybe as much as 2/3 of my life as a writer is rewriting. I wouldn't say I have a talent that's special. It strikes me that my talent is unusual kind of stamina. So basically a lot of doing something that seems like it takes tremendous amount of time and all that is just that you put the time into it. You're willing to make that level of commitment to it. Most people don't want to sit around in a room all day long by themselves writing a book. And you got to do that day after day for many months on end. I've gotten myself to the point where I can write a book pretty fast, but it's only because I've written so many of them. I pretty much got usually half the chapters already done. I just have to rearrange things a little bit, make them fit, but I've got all the knowledge. It's when I go into a new territory that it takes a lot more time and effort to write something. You got to see the beginning to the end in your mind's eye before you can put it all together. You can't just randomly write it. It'll be a mess. Let's see what he says. My life as a writer consists 1/8 of talent and 7/8 of discipline. Whatever I write, no matter how gray or how dark the subject matter, it's always going to be a comic novel. Yeah, and I think to some extent that's your personality. I'm always going to put jokes in my books. That's what I want to do. I'm always going to put paintings in there and quotes and whatever I feel like doing. And like I said too, I already know I'm never going to be accepted by conventional medicine, conventional society, conventional publishing. They all hate people like me, but I still think I'm the best because I just tell the truth and like it is. And I get tons of compliments from the people who actually know me. But if you want to fit in with mainstream publishing and get into the mainstream bookstores and stuff, that's not easy to do. You could do it if you really behave good and you don't make jokes and you don't play games. But if I didn't make jokes and play games, I would be so bored. And I like my books just the way they are. So anyways, yeah, and it takes too long to write with a regular publishing company. Next thing he says. The way you define yourself as a writer is that you write every time you have a free minute. Because if you didn't behave that way, you would never write anything. You have to get stuff done fast because if you wait too long, you can't remember everything. You have to have it in your mind's eye, the start to the finish, everything clear, because writing is cumulative. If you don't have it in your mind's eye and do it fast, what will end up happening is you'll keep repeating yourself and the quality of the book will go down and down and down. So you have to make a deadline. This is when I got a free 5 days. Go. And just do it. Then it'll read in a coherent manner from start to finish. He says, I feel more of a part of the wrestling community than I feel I belong to a community of arts and letters. Why? Because wrestling requires even more dedication than writing. Because wrestling represents the most difficult and rewarding objective that I have ever dedicated myself to. Because wrestling and wrestling coaches are among the most disciplined and self-sacrificing people I've ever known. I always liked wrestlers. I still like wrestlers. They're open. They're honest. There's no bullshit in wrestling. If you're going to be the starter on the team, you have to beat everybody in wrestle-offs. Everybody knows who's the best person. The hierarchy is completely fair. Okay, real life's not like that. Real life, there's ethnic favoritism, institutional favoritism, nepotism. There's all kinds of bullshit, affirmative action that screws you over. Theoretically, I should benefit from affirmative action, but I seldom do. Okay, here is Rip Van Winkle. This is a book by Washington Irving, so letter I for Irving. We're going in that order. Rip Van Winkle's a guy who fell asleep for a prolonged amount of time. Then he woke up and he noticed how much things have changed. And I once made a YouTube video like that, like how things have changed since when I was a kid, 1970s and 1980s. I grew up in America back when America still was proud of who it was, proud of how great it was, and it should be that way. I went to England, which was sort of considered the second best country in the world when I was a young guy around 1980. And compared to USA, England sucked. I mean, they were sort of heroic for many things they did in World War II. The Royal Air Force. They were sort of known as having all these great rock and rollers, the Rolling Stones, the Who, Led Zeppelin and stuff. But when I went there already in 1980, it was already becoming a third world country. The hotel I stayed in, the Buswell, and across the street from Hyde Park in London, it was like Motel 6 compared to the USA, and that was their wealth. You didn't even have your own bathroom in your room. I'm like, man, these people are poor. I didn't quite understand it, but I had a sense this socialism stuff is driving them into poverty. They're becoming a third world shithole, and the guys were all weak, and everybody had bad teeth. They looked like a bunch of wussies, and my brothers and me, we were all big, strong athletes, so all these English guys would stare around looking at us while we're eating. We ate probably at least twice as much food as them. It caused like a little miniature event in the hotel restaurant when we were there. Okay, Washington Irving quotes. He's the author of some great American short stories, Rip Van Winkle, Legend of Sleepy Hollow. That's a good theme anytime for writing, is somebody who comes as an outsider and how they observe a place. Like you could say a Martian comes and what would they observe? It's like the illusion I made that if a person from the Renaissance came and saw a modern art museum, they would think we were the lowest of the low barbarians. A modern art fake crap could be done by a child. Legend of Sleepy Hollow was a scary story. I read that stuff when I was a kid, read that in high school. He wrote a good biography of GW. He wrote good biographies of Spain, and he was, Christopher Columbus and all that stuff. So again, when I was a young guy, all these guys were big heroes. We had this attitude: America is the best. Russia might beat us sometimes in wrestling because their athletes are professionals. Our guys are amateurs, but we often beat them too. That was kind of our attitude. But Russia sucks at everything else other than their athletes who they subsidize and who are on testosterone, anabolics. Okay, Rip Van Winkle, we talked about that. He woke up with a beard. Okay, now just a couple quick quotes by him. A sharp tongue is the only edged tool that grows keener with constant use. Yeah, so that's good. It's good to have people you can talk like that with. And I said too, like my kids, they thanked me for all the teasing I did with them in the kitchen, that they now had good verbal skills to banter back and forth with their friends. A barking dog is more useful than a sleeping lion. After a man passes 60, his mischief is mainly in his head. A mother is the truest friend we have. He who would greatly deserve must greatly dare. Great minds have purposes, others have wishes. Little minds are tamed and subdued by misfortune, but a great mind rises above that. Okay, the next one is Charlotte Iserbyt, the last one for today. And she had been in the Department of Education. And she saw that the Department of Education was getting worse and worse and worse, that they were dumbing down the schools in deliberate effort to dumb down America, to screw over the proles. And that was around the time of Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan was like one of the last really good presidents. Don't get me wrong, all of them make some mistakes, but he was pretty good compared to the other ones. I can tell you, back in those days, I lived in California for a while, in the 1980s. It was so rich. Kids could go to junior college for free. It was rich. When you thought California, you thought rich. Okay? Everybody wanted to live in California. It was rich. It was successful. It was a place of innovation. It was the place to be. And nowadays, what do you think of when you think of California? You think the Democrats control the place. It's a third world crap hole. Tons of crimes and riots and poverty and homeless people. It's a crap hole. The left destroys everything they touch. They're just evil. They're communists, okay? That's what they want, is to bring back slavery. They have no moral high ground, okay? Even though it almost seems like, well, we'll just leave it at that. So I want to tell you what Charlotte Iserbyt said, because she basically, tried to save the school system. And they didn't let her, but at least she tried. She wrote, vouchers and educational choice, they're just a way to take over the private schools. When a program is unsuccessful and unpopular, like Mastery Learning, the name gets changed to something like Direct Instruction, but it's really the same thing. So tracking students' attendance and behavior makes it easier to take away their driver's licenses. I'm in big agreement with these educational experts who think we should get rid of the public schools. I think the public schools are a disgrace and they're evil and they hurt people a lot more than they help. And people say, well, how can you do that? People need to get educated. What do you learn in the public schools? The literacy rates were much, much higher when you didn't have public schools. You'll want to learn how to read on your own, okay? And that's easy to do with the phonics method. The schools just, they turn you away from God, turn you away from your parents, turn people into little hedonistic degenerates. Okay, she continues. Liberal arts education is being replaced by vocational training. Yeah, liberal arts is education for a free man. They don't want you to be free. They want you to be a slave, a wage slave, or even worse. John Dewey paved the way for dumbed-down education. Most students will be trained for low-skill, low-pay jobs. Less than 15% of jobs will require a bachelor degree. The 5 most common jobs will be cashiers, janitors, cleaners, sales clerks, and nurses. Yeah, what they really want is reduce the population, just keep a couple people around to clean the toilets, a little bit more educated group to run the machines, but not have too many of them around. That's what the billionaire perverts want. And what the billionaire perverts do is they just push money down. They'll buy a publishing company to make textbooks, and they'll force the textbook company writers to make those books promote communism. Okay, that's what they do, to say United States stinks, it's racist, all this other stuff, and destroy the history of the place and teach things in a way that kids can't remember anything. Nobody can remember historical dates. You have to know the people that were involved, okay? And they'll teach it based on dates because they want you to forget anything meaningful. Okay, Charlotte Iserbyt continues. Sending mothers to work outside the home gets their children into the schools earlier so they can be conditioned to accept low-skill, low-paying jobs. Plato, B.F. Skinner, and many others believe that children should not be raised by their parents. Yes, that's what the public school system believes. They think they know better than the parents, which is completely wrong. The parents love the child. They want the best for the child. The school system just wants to train them to be a slave. Okay? The whole public school system is designed to dumb down students so they are easier to control. Yeah, conformist lightweights, hedonistic lightweights who only do things for rewards, they're easy to control. But you can't control a Christian very well. They've said that. That's well known in communist Russia. They said, we cannot control the Christians. That's right. You cannot control me. I'm a devout Christian. I will do whatever I think is right in my view of what I think God wants from me. That's what I'm going to do. Okay? So they hate that. The billionaire perverts hate that. The established system, the left hates that because those people are independently functioning. And on the other hand, those people are independently functioning. They're going to achieve more. They're going to have more energy. Okay, and if you look at people who grew up, I know a whole bunch of people that grew up in communist Russia or communist Eastern Europe, and so, it's routine for them to say, my father was an alcoholic. The men sort of give up because they have no opportunity, no hope of ever being allowed to do anything, so they just become alcoholics, tons of them. There's nothing more common than an Eastern European telling you that their father was an alcoholic. Okay, so Charlotte Iserbyt continues. They want students to only do things for rewards, not to do anything out of their own free choice or values. This makes them much easier to control. The plan for education was to use mastery learning with a Pavlov Skinner behavioral conditioning method to destroy free will. The history books have been rewritten to convince people of a modernist viewpoint. Yeah, whenever a tyrant takes over a country, they rewrite the history books to make it seem as if the previous history was all bad and that the new history of what is good is leading up to themselves, the tyrant. So that's pretty typical. So in America, it has been hidden from Americans that our Western civilization tradition of Christianity comes from the ancient Greeks and to a lesser extent from Romans. The ancient Romans, they recognized ancient Greek was totally superior to them. So they just accepted what they got from ancient Greece. They accepted ancient Greek mythology. They might change the names of some of the gods, but they were the same gods. They also just recognized they were superior in philosophy, superior in theater, superior in politics, like, Plato, for example, like Aristotle, the first biologist, first medical school, the first library, the first school of rhetoric. All of that stuff came from the ancient Greeks, and then the Romans just copied them. And I mention all of that because the USA pretty much does the same thing with Europe. Europe had the intellectual giants, and then the USA, to a large extent, just copied them. The USA still hasn't produced a writer of the stature of the great European writers. The greatest European writers you've got from Russia, Fyodor Dostoevsky, from England, Charles Dickens, George Orwell, Henry Sienkiewicz from Poland, Les Miserables, Victor Hugo from France. America's never produced a writer of that stature as of yet, okay? Ayn Rand was great, but she's not of that level. There's other ones who've been great, Tom Wolfe, of course, but, they're not at that level. Michael Crichton's very entertaining, but he's not at the level of those other ones in terms of emotional meaning that resonates with you and guides how you live your life. He's more like fun suspense. Okay, so anyway, she continues. The French Revolution was really a communist revolution. That's important to remember too. Anything that wants to get rid of God is communist, okay? And the reason why they always want that is because it gives them free reign to do anything they want, like, the guillotine, of course. 50,000 French people lost their lives that way. Okay, the long-term goal was to merge the USA with the Soviet Russia and then to call it the North American Soviet Union. Yeah, I think the intermediate step was to combine us with Canada and then combine us with Mexico and have that be the North American Union. And then eventually maybe even combine us with Russia, okay, through Alaska. And maybe that's really happening. I've seen a whole bunch of videos to the extent of provinces in Canada saying they want to become part of USA. And so is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? I don't know. It'd be a good thing if it was all Christian and free. It's a bad thing if it just means centralization of control for, forever slavery and tyranny and panopticon. Okay. She continues, consolidation and regionalization are euphemisms for centralization and communism. The computer makes it much easier to train students in this way, to brainwash them. Because with a computer, there's no one else involved in the education except the student and the computer. There is no person. There is no human relationship. She said, pretty soon all schools will have no books. They'll be bookless. Just have everything on computers. That's all bad. Because, people say, oh, all this, we're excellent, this, excellent, that. They suck, okay? They're worse than ever. If you go on the internet, you'll see nonstop teachers resigning because they say all their students are a bunch of little poorly behaved illiterates. The look-say method and all this other stuff, drugging all the attention deficit kids, totally being cruel to the boys, trying to force them to live in a feminist context. That's ridiculous. I think you should separate the boys from the girls when they're young. Boys are boys, girls are girls. There's a big difference. And to pretend otherwise is a disservice, because then almost all the teachers are women. God, I was almost losing my mind in grade school. I was so bored out of my mind, staring out the windows, and I'd get in trouble for stupid stuff because of all that. I think that was a normal reaction to how bad it was. Anyways, I hope you found these quotes helpful.